Thank you, Vice Chair. Good afternoon. The board meeting of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey and its component units is now called to order due to the ongoing public health crisis posed by COVID and in light of the advice from the CDC and prevention and the states of New York and New Jersey health departments. Today's meeting is being held virtually via teleconference with audio being live streamed from Port Authority's website. Earlier today, the Committee on Finance and the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management met in public session. The Security Committee on the Committee on Finance met in executive session, and the Committees on Finance and Audit met jointly in executive session. The reports will be filed with the official minutes of today's board meeting. The Commissioners also met in executive session earlier today to discuss matters related to personnel and personnel procedures, matters involving ongoing negotiations or reviews of contracts or proposals, and matters related to the purchase, sale, or lease of real property where disclosure would affect the value thereof of the public interest. We will begin this meeting by recognizing an extraordinary action performed by two Port Authority police sergeants at the Midtown Bus Terminal on March 27th. On that day, two police sergeants identified and apprehended an individual wanted for questioning by the New York Police Department's hate crime task force in connection with some anti-Asian hate crimes committed in the Midtown area. We ask our Superintendent of Public Safety, Ed Setnar, to provide some details. Ed?
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you again for the honor of recognizing the hard work of the men and women of the police department, also the executive director, the commissioners, the other chiefs and colleagues that are listening to this. At 1700 hours on March 27, 2021, police sergeants Liam Husko and Edgar Suarez were on patrol at the Port Authority bus terminal when they noticed a male individual who fit the description of a person wanted for questioning by the NYPD's hate crime task force for an anti-Asian incident that had occurred the day prior. The sergeants conducted a stop for investigative purposes and contacted the task force via the NYPD tip line. The male, who failed to present identification at the time of the stop, was run for wants and warrants, and based on the information he provided, which returned negative results, the hate crime task force had expressed interest in speaking to this individual and subsequently came to the bus terminal command to interview the subject. Members of the task force, as they approached the command, spoke with both sergeants. Port Authority Police receives countless BOLOs, which are be on the lookout for, bulletins each and every day to all members of the force from federal, state, and local municipalities all over the country. Serving 11 transient facilities, it is imperative that all members of the force examine these postings, as those wanted can cross our roadways, tunnels, and corridors at any time. Sergeant Husko and Suarez honed their recollection skills based on the BOLO and were able to identify and prevent this subject from threatening or harming anyone else. Their attention to detail, along with their dedication to service of others and to their profession, are being recognized today, as they are in accordance with the highest standards and traditions of the Port Authority Police Department. Subsequently, as a result of the interview, NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force did arrest this subject on the BOLO and the information that the sergeants both observed. Deputy Superintendent Clark and Chief Gonzalez will now present the certification of recognition presented by you, Chairman, and all the commissioners for the timely job and the police work that they did. I'll present Deputy Superintendent Clark to present the recognition awards from the board.
Sergeant Husko, here's your recognition for exceptional service. Please know that this is from the board. Would you like me to read the entire citation at this time, sir? Okay, very good. All right, thank you very much. Job well done. Thank you. Sergeant Suarez, this is from the entire board. Thank you, sir.
Chairman, Commissioners, I present to you Sergeant Husko and Sergeant Suarez. Thank you.
Superintendent, thank you very much. And I know they opted not to read the resolution. So let's hear from us directly, from the executive director and from the chair, from the commissioners and the vice chair. Thank you to Sergeant Husko and Sergeant Suarez for doing your jobs every day, and really appreciate the effort that you took, particularly on March 27th. We've seen unprecedented amounts of increase of hate crime against Asians in 2020. I think it's over 800% or 500%, and one of those numbers are reflective of the increase in the first quarter in 2021. So to Ed, you and the men and women you are overseeing and who are protecting our assets, we say thank you very much for the daily sacrifice and putting their life on the line. And we really appreciate the vigilance in going after these individuals who want to perpetuate and prey upon the Asian American communities in particular at this time. Thank you very much, and thank you both sergeants.
Thank you, Chairman. We greatly appreciate the support of everybody. Thank you so much.
At this time, I'd like to present our Executive Director, who will provide his report, and he will give us an update on what's happening with regard to the impacts on the coronavirus. Mr. Executive Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The COVID-19 crisis does continue to dominate the agency's agenda. As the region continues its measured reopening, all our facilities continue to operate at a very high standard and with high attention to the need to continue safety protocols. Record low volumes do continue at Port Authority airports and on the PATH system. Although volume at the airports is starting to increase, it remains only at 35 to 40% of pre-COVID levels. There has been faster recovery at our bridges and tunnels and at the seaports. Vehicular traffic at our bridges and tunnels has now increased to more than 90% of pre-COVID levels, and the seaport continues to see record volumes well above pre-COVID levels. Overall, the region's reopening and its progress on vaccination distribution has led to the highest activity volumes at Port Authority facilities since the start of the pandemic, but we are still far from normal. In particular, at the airports, as I say, they are operating at 35 to 40%, and at PATH is operating at about 25% of pre-COVID levels. Those low volume levels continue to have an extremely adverse impact on Port Authority finances. I do want to emphasize, as I do at every meeting, that we continue to be profoundly grateful to all Port Authority employees for their continued commitment and extraordinary hard work. And we are grateful to the leaders of the 23 unions that represent the majority of our employees for their cooperation and support in addressing the challenges posed by the pandemic. Earlier in this meeting, the Chief Financial Officer summarized the Port Authority's financial results for the first quarter of 2021. From my perspective, the headline is that the agency's first quarter hit all the targets set in the 2021 austerity COVID-19 budget, a testament to the financial discipline of this organization. Both revenues and expenses are coming in as budgeted, but it is important to emphasize, as our CFO did, that the budget was set anticipating the impact of a $1 billion revenue loss in 2021 compared to what had been projected. The agency continues to project a total of $2.7 billion in lost revenue from the beginning of the pandemic through the end of 2021 and a $3 billion revenue loss covering the 24-month period stretching from March 2020 through March 2022. Let me now turn to more detail on our facility operating volumes. Based on the week of April 12th, 2021 to April 16th, 2021, passenger volumes at Port Authority airports for that week were down by 61% compared to the pre-COVID April 2019 weekday average. While this is the best performance since March 2020, it is still obviously very far from pre-COVID levels. At PATH's average weekday ridership for that week was down by 76% compared to the pre-COVID April 2019 weekday average, and that has showed little change over the past 6 months. At our bridges and tunnels, overall weekday vehicular traffic for that week was down 9% compared to pre-COVID April 2019 weekday vehicular traffic, continuing to show a gradual increase of vehicle traffic at our bridges and tunnels. At the port, the seaport's March cargo volumes remained extremely strong, and they will hit 35% above pre-COVID 2019 levels for the month of March. That is the 8th month in a row of record-setting cargo volumes. And I also might take note that the port has handled this record high volume of cargo without congestion and is fully prepared to handle any surge of ships that may follow from the backup at the Suez Canal. With respect to workforce impacts of the coronavirus on Port Authority employees, as of this Wednesday, April 21st, yesterday, 91 Port Authority employees have reported positive test results for COVID-19 in the last 30 days. One Port Authority employee is currently hospitalized. We continue to follow up with this individual and each employee who has tested positive to assure that our employees are receiving any and all needed medical care. We also closely monitor cases to assure that all safety protocols are being followed at all of our facilities. As of today, 159 employees are currently self-quarantining, reflecting a continuing decline over the past 2 weeks. These workforce results have been a tribute to the great commitment and great discipline demonstrated at all levels of the agency to the implementation of protective health and safety measures. We also focused on employee vaccinations. As of this week, all individuals age 16 and older are eligible to receive the COVID-19 vaccine if they live or work in the states of New York and New Jersey. And the Port Authority continues to make every effort to encourage and assist agency employees in getting vaccinated. We are conducting virtual information sessions for all employees, and the agency has established an extensive network of 122 departmental vaccine coordinators to actively assist employees in scheduling appointments at vaccination sites convenient to them. A word on the federal funding front. The Port Authority is engaging with the Biden administration and the Congress on the Biden administration's proposed infrastructure bill after our previous proposal for funding multi-state aid entities was not included in the state and local aid portion of the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan Act that was signed into law in early March. While negotiations over an infrastructure bill in Washington are in their early stages, the agency continues to work with the congressional delegations of both states, congressional leadership, and with the administration to push for federal funding to address our projected $3 billion COVID-related revenue loss. As we enter the Port Authority's 100th year, I can report to the board that the agency continues to operate all of our facilities at a very high standard with extensive health protocols necessitated by the pandemic. And in that connection, I am pleased to report to the board that the Port Authority's 5 airports were certified this month by the Global Biorisk Advisory Council as employing the highest health standards and best safety practices to protect both customers and employees from COVID-19. The airports underwent 6 months of review and inspection by GBAC to demonstrate the multitude of best practices and health safety protocols that the airports employ in order to receive this certification. Only 35 airports worldwide have qualified for this certification. Our airports had previously received a similar certification from Airports Council International. Under the leadership of Huntley Lawrence, our Chief Operating Officer and Director of Aviation, our airports are truly best in class from a health and safety perspective. I can also assure the board that all of our facilities bring a similar focus to bear on health and safety for both our customers and our employees. With that, I conclude my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the commissioners on the report by the Executive Director? The only issue I want to touch upon, Rick, is the issue of vaccinations, which you've been pretty loud and we've been in unison about. We're really urging our employees to get vaccinated. By all accounts, I think 38% of our employees have at least one shot, 28% have had the second shot or are fully vaccinated. And at this stage of the game, at April 22nd, we really have to encourage all of our employees, those that can, we ask that they get vaccinated. At some point, sooner than later, we have to start talking about migrating back and resuming a more normal business schedule. We can't do that until there's this herd immunity, or we have a proper amount of folks as detected and diagnosed by the scientists and the doctors in terms of our employees in total getting vaccinated. So our employees' message is to you: please go out, get vaccinated, and be part of the solution. On another note, Rick, there was a notice sent a couple weeks ago, and it's with great pride I will talk to the public about it. Rarely are there proper recognitions for people at the Port Authority who do really great things. And while I know, Rick, it is not in your it's not your style to want to be recognized, but at some point, we have to talk about the wonderful contributions that you have brought forward to this region and to the Port Authority. The RPA has selected you to receive the John Zuccotti Award, which is an extraordinary award. Those individuals in the past who have received it include the chair of the Amtrak, our current President Biden, and a former HUD secretary. The RPA has recognized individuals who have had an extraordinary contribution to built infrastructures in this tri-state region, and they have selected you, Rick, as the executive director of this wonderful agency. So on behalf of the commissioners, on behalf of this agency, I want to say congratulations, well done. And we couldn't be more proud, and I couldn't agree more with the RPA by recognizing your extraordinary efforts.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for those comments. As I've said many times, infrastructure projects are truly a team sport, to use a phrase that's probably overused, but it takes everyone pulling together within an agency. It takes outreach to other stakeholders. It takes partners. It takes engagement with communities that are affected by projects and by our facilities. And all these individuals, all these sets of stakeholders have to come together in order to have successful projects. So I will be accepting the award on behalf of all of the partners, all of the stakeholders, all of the communities who have joined to bring critically important infrastructure projects into being. But I thank you for your generous words.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from the other commissioners? Alrighty, moving ahead. As we all know, 8 days from now, April 30th, 2021, it marks the 100th anniversary of the Port Authority. And while a year and a half ago we had grand designs as to what this centennial would look like, we formed a committee and we talked about the parties, and we talked about all the wonderful events we were going to hold throughout the year. COVID has obviously hampered and hindered that dramatically, but we still think it is of great importance that we celebrate this very important date starting 8 days from now. With that, we have our acting Chief Operating Officer and Director of Aviation, Huntley Lawrence, and our Director of Strategic Communications, Alfred Doblin, will provide a presentation that will give us a little snapshot of an overview of some of the major milestones in the Port Authority's history, along with a brief summary of how we are acknowledging the centennial. Huntley and Alfred, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Commissioners. As we count down the last days of the Port Authority's 99th year, I want to take a few moments to update you on the Port Authority's centennial. For a century, the Port Authority has kept this region moving, connecting not only two states, but creating gateways to the world via air, land, rail, and sea. Our frontline workers, police, administrative support, and management teams oversee a vast portfolio of transportation facilities that connect the greatest metropolitan region in the world. In the early 20th century, congestion at the Port of New York and New Jersey led experts to realize the need for an organization to manage the extremely complex system of bridges, highways, subways, and port facilities in the metropolitan area. On April 30th, 1921, the Port Authority was established by an interstate compact authorized by Congress to administer the common harbor interest of New York and New Jersey. By issuing its own bonds, the agency is financially independent, as bonds are paid off from tolls and fees, not taxes. This allowed the Port Authority to quickly become a key agency in the metropolitan region for building large-scale transportation projects. In the agency's first 10 years, the Port Authority opened 4 new bridges: the Goethals, the Outer Bridge, George Washington, and Bayonne. In the 1930s, the Port Authority acquired the Holland Tunnel and kept building, opening a new Lincoln Tunnel in 1937. From there, the people of the Port Authority continued to build, to deliver the improvements and enhancements to the region's transportation network that was required to move people and commerce in even greater numbers, creating and sustaining hundreds of thousands of jobs. In the 1940s, the agency set its sights to the skies, acquiring 4 airports that went on to support a budding aviation industry. And while the agency was busy building infrastructure, it saw the birth of the shipping container industry at Port Newark. At the same time, the Port Authority became synonymous with transportation greatness, thanks to giants of our industry, and perhaps none more so than one of the agency's first employees and longest-serving executive director, Austin Tobin. Mr. Tobin joined the agency as a law clerk in 1921, one of only 300 employees at the time. His vision, guided by the governors of New York and New Jersey, transformed the agency, gave it great purpose and direction, and took us to new heights, figuratively, but also literally, as the chief executive behind the original World Trade Center complex. Under Mr. Tobin's leadership, the agency opened the Midtown Manhattan Bus Terminal, acquired the Hudson and Manhattan Railroad, later named PATH, built and opened the lower level of the George Washington Bridge and the George Washington Bus Station, and opened the Journal Square Transportation Center, and of course, the Twin Towers. When Mr. Tobin retired in 1972, he had grown the agency to approximately 7,900 employees and invested $2.6 billion in the region's infrastructure. Now, in this most recent period of Port Authority history, we have seen the agency respond to current and future transportation needs with innovation for the 21st century, expanding PATH facilities to accommodate shifting populations, constructing a new modern Goethals Bridge 90 years after the original bridge opened, and re-engineering one of those bridges in-house, raising the deck of the Bayonne so our port can accommodate the world's largest container ships and keep our region on the forefront of global commerce. The Port Authority is redesigning, rebuilding its airports so they will finally become the gateways that this region deserves, meet demand well into the future, and provide critical rail transit connections to the region's hubs. It's certainly impossible to talk about the history of the Port Authority without acknowledging those we lost in the terrorist attacks at the World Trade Center in 1993 and 2001. The 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center claimed the lives of 6 victims, including 4 Port Authority colleagues and an unborn child. The September 11th terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center claimed the lives of 84 of our colleagues, including 37 members of the Port Authority Police Department. We honor those that we lost every day by upholding a legacy of resiliency and recovery at the Port Authority. The employees of this agency, and there have been over 46,000 of them to date since our founding, have shown time and time again what it means to lead, to persevere, and to be resilient in the wake of tragedy. Former employees like former Chief Operating Officer Ernesto Butcher, who led this agency through the aftermath of 9/11 with more than 4 decades of service to the agency. Giants like Susan Baer, who managed in succession the Lincoln Tunnel and Manhattan Bus Terminal, LaGuardia Airport, Newark Airport, JFK Airport, and then became Director of Aviation, a leader of rare skill and grace, a pioneer and fierce advocate for women in the aviation industry. Alongside these two stood so many others, to say nothing of those who came before them, and standing on their shoulder, we found our way forward through crisis after crisis to where we stand today, on the precipice of our 2nd century, facing down a pandemic with the same determination that has led us forward countless times before. The Port Authority and its employees have led with courage, risen to meet challenges, and honored those that we've lost, continuing to build on the legacy of service established by those who have come before us. Through it all, the Port Authority continues to learn and improve. Today's focus on diversity and inclusion, sustainability and resiliency, world-class transportation facilities, and 21st century global standards ensures that we'll keep this region moving for at least the next 100 years and honor the legacy gifted to us by so many immensely talented people who've accomplished so much in and throughout a century of dedicated public service. Commissioners, I'm now going to turn the presentation over to Alfred Doblin, Director of Strategic Communications of the Port Authority, to update you on the Port Authority's centennial programming. Alfred.
Thank you, Huntley. The Port Authority's centennial provides an opportunity to develop programs that both educate and foster discussion on the role the transportation infrastructure has played in the growth and the development of the region. Highlighting the 4 bulleted points on your screen, the New York Historical Society has created a pop-up exhibit that will be moved across Port Authority facilities throughout 2021 that looks at the facilities and the services run by the agency and the regional impact they have had these past 100 years. The Rudin Center at NYU and the Voorhees Center at Rutgers are developing 4 symposia that bring together academics and experts in transportation and infrastructure to discuss the role the Port Authority has played as a unifying force in the region through infrastructure development, its impact in New York and New Jersey, and discuss how changing demographic patterns and technologies may shape the next 100 years. The keynote for the first symposia next Wednesday, which will be sponsored by NYU Rudin, is former Executive Director Peter Goldmark. The Oral Histories Project, in conjunction with Montclair State University, has enabled the Port Authority to work with MSU interns under my supervision to interview former leaders and long-serving Port Authority employees. Due to COVID restrictions, the interviews have all been conducted remotely. And on April 30th, 2021, next Friday, a centennial plaque will be dedicated in front of the Oculus on the World Trade Center campus. A time capsule will be committed into the stone below the plaque. The capsule will contain artifacts and memorabilia that reflect the history of the agency, including a piece of World Trade Center steel and a piece of cable from the George Washington Bridge. Thank you.
All set. First of all, Huntley, thank you very much for that recitation and look back in history of the last 99 years. It is fascinating to see the projects that were brought up in the 20s and 30s and 40s, just the amazing amount of bridges and tunnels, almost overnight. And Alfred, thank you very much for giving us, in terms of what the planned events are. I don't think that we can do enough to give everyone a real perspective and history of what has occurred. I mean, to capture the history as we understand it and preserve it for future generations. And we are all looking forward to the centennial plaque. And it'll be quite curious 100 years from now when they open up that time capsule, Rick, and find out what we left behind. And they'll say, how did we deal with certain things that we've come across? And what is this zip drive that's stuck in this capsule? What does this mean? But we're looking forward to it. And again, it's sad in some respects that we can't have a full-out anniversary celebration throughout this year. But we're going to find enough to capture the spirit and the dedication that has defined the Port Authority for the last 100 years, and we'll do so in a manner befitting of those who have come before us and those who will come after us. Thank you, Alfred, and thank you, Huntley. Any commissioners, any comments or questions to the two presenters?
This is Jeff Linford, Mr. Chairman. I want to add my thanks to Alfred, who I know has been working on this for over a year, as well as Huntley, who's been working on it for decades. So good work to both of you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anybody else? All righty, let's move ahead. In terms of our speakers program today, we've received 3 written statements that were shared with the board earlier today. These statements will be filed with the transcript in today's board meeting and posted on the Port Authority website. After the meeting, I'll point out that the statements do not relate to items that are before the board today. Mr. Secretary, can you confirm that those written statements do not impact or relate to items before our consideration?
That is correct.
At this time, we will proceed with the voting on the items for today's consideration. Each of the respective committee chairs will provide a brief report prior to the matter being considered. Vice Chair Jeff Linford, as Chair of the Committee on Capital, Planning, Execution, and Asset Management, will now provide a report on the one item before our consideration.
Thank you, Chairman O'Toole. As Chair of the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management, I will now report on an item that was reviewed with the committee earlier today. The item authorizes amendments to the leases with JFK International Air Terminal and Delta Airlines to facilitate a phased upgrade and expansion of Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport. Prior to making a motion on this item, I ask the corporate secretary to note any commissioner recusals.
There are no recusals required.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions or comments on this item? Hearing none, I now request a motion on this item.
So moved, Mr. Vice Chairman.
Thank you. Can I have a second?
Second, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I now request the corporate secretary to call the roll for voting on this item.
Chairman O'Toole?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Linford?
Yes.
Commissioner Bagger?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner LaBarbera?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Pacino?
Yes.
Commissioner Rosado indicated her affirmative vote. She's having connectivity issues.
That's it, Jim?
Yes.
As the votes are in order, this item is approved, and I turn it back to our esteemed Chairman O'Toole.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I now turn to Commissioner Bagger as Chair of the Committee on Finance. He'll now provide his report on the one item before this committee. Richard?
Thank you, Chairman O'Toole. I'm recommending to the Finance Committee to consider one item at today's meeting. This item authorizes the renewal of property damage and loss of revenue insurance coverage for Port Authority assets, including coverage for acts of terrorism. The coverage is placed under two separate programs, one of which covers the World Trade Center site, and the second covering all other facilities of the Port Authority and its component units. This is a vote of the Finance Committee only because we've been delegated authority to approve contracts of insurance by resolution of the full board. Prior to making a motion on this item, I'd ask the corporate secretary to note any commissioner recusals on this item.
There are no recusals on this matter.
Are there any questions or comments? If not, can I request a motion from a committee member?
A motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second from a committee member?
Second.
Terrific. Thank you. I request the corporate secretary to call the roll of committee members for voting on this item.
Commissioner Bagger?
Yes.
Commissioner Eve?
Yes.
Commissioner Horwitz?
Yes.
Commissioner McCabe?
Yes.
Commissioner Pacino?
Yes.
So that item is approved. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes our committee report.
Thank you, Commissioner Bagger. There being no further business, I move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Those against? None? Meeting's now adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Cheers, Steve.